Hello everyone. What happens when the woman Alex loves forces him to leave for the sake of her child, only to discover moments later that the darkness outside her gate is still there, still watching, still close enough to whisper that sending him away will not save the baby in her arms. If your heart can endure a love that is pulled apart and called back together by fear in the very same morning, stay with me. The sound of Alex's car had barely faded when the farmhouse became too still. Tuna stood in the front room with Henry in her arms, unable to move, unable even to breathe properly. The message on her phone still glowed in her hand. Sending him away won't save you. Outside, hanging from the gate latch in the pale morning light, was the new parcel. Small, neat, deliberate, as if it had been placed there by someone patient enough to wait until Alex was gone. Henry shifted against her shoulder and gave a soft, unhappy whimper. At 1 year old, he could not understand threats, only the body that held him. He could feel when his mother's arms tightened too suddenly, when her breathing changed, when fear moved through her like a current. His tiny fingers opened and closed weakly against the front of her blouse, searching for something familiar to anchor to. Tuna kissed the side of his head, but her lips were cold. The room smelled faintly of warmed porridge, baby soap, and the tea Alex had left untouched. Morning light fell across the table, the chair, the folded blanket near the bed. Everything looked painfully ordinary. That made the terror worse. The house still wore the face of peace, even after peace had already been broken. She had sent Alex away to protect Henry, and now the gate itself seemed to answer back. For one trembling second, Tuna tried to imagine enduring this alone. Then Henry gave another fretful little cry, and her hand began to shake so badly around the phone that she no longer had the strength to pretend. She called Alex, and before he even answered, her heart already knew she had made the only choice left to her. Alex answered on the first ring. Tuna. She closed her eyes when she heard his voice. It was not relief exactly. Relief was too clean a feeling for what this was. This was the collapse of the thin wall she had forced herself to build only minutes earlier. "There's another package," she whispered. At the gate, the change in Alex was instant, even across the line. "Did you touch it?" "No." "Are you inside?" "Yes." "Lock the door again." "It's already locked." He was silent for half a heartbeat, the kind of silence made not of hesitation, but of movement. She could hear the car already turning. "I'm coming back," he said. Tuna pressed Henry closer and leaned one hand against the edge of the table because her knees had gone weak. "Alex, I'm already turning around." That ended it. No accusation, no wounded pride. No pause to remind her that she had been the one to send him away. Only that one answer, immediate and certain, the way a man answers when the only thing that matters is getting back before fear grows larger. Tuna lowered the phone slowly after the call ended. Henry began to fuss more seriously now, not crying hard but making those thin, strained sounds babies make when they are tired, confused, and too aware of tension in the arms holding them. She rocked him gently, walked to the bedroom, walked back. Tried to lay him down for a moment so she could think more clearly, but the instant his back touched the blanket, his face folded and his hands lifted in blind distress. She picked him up again at once. "It's all right," she whispered. "Mommy's here." But her own voice no longer sounded convincing to her. She could feel the parcel even without looking at it, as though the thing hanging at the gate had a presence of its own, pressing against the house from outside. The morning had brightened fully now. Birds called from somewhere beyond the trees. A neighbor's motorbike passed far down the road. The ordinary world had resumed, and yet every familiar sound seemed to deepen the unreality of what was happening here. Tuna moved to the window, but did not get too close. The parcel remained exactly where it had been, swaying only slightly in the morning breeze. Brown paper again, twine again, too tidy, too intentional, not thrown, not hidden, displayed. Whoever had left it wanted her to see it as soon as the house was alone. Henry tucked his face against her neck and made a small broken sound. She rubbed his back slowly, feeling the warmth of his tiny body, the softness of his hair against her chin, the desperate dependence of a child, too young to do anything except trust the one person holding him. That trust nearly crushed her. She had sent Alex away because she thought distance might save this child. But fear had reached the gate even faster than regret. By the time Alex's car returned to the yard, Tuna had barely moved from the center of the room. The sound of his engine pulling in did something to the air inside the house. It did not make the danger vanish, It did, however, make the terror stop expanding. He came to the door quickly, stopped just outside, and knocked once so she would hear his voice before she opened. "It's me." Only then did she lift the latch. When Alex stepped inside, he took in everything at once. The fear on her face, Henry clinging fretfully to her shoulder, the phone still in her hand, the fact that her eyes had the hollow brightness of someone who had already spent too many hours surviving on too little rest and too much dread. For 1 second, he looked as though he wanted to say something tender and impossible. Instead, he asked the only question that mattered first. "Did anyone come near the house after I left?" She shook her head. "I didn't see anyone, just the parcel and the message." Alex held out his hand. "Show me." She passed him the phone. His face hardened when he read the words, not with surprise, with confirmation. Then his eyes lifted to her. "You did the right thing calling me." Something in her expression trembled. That simple line hurt almost more than comfort would have, because he could have made her feel ashamed. He could have reminded her that she had been the one to ask for distance. He did none of that. He only returned. Henry fussed again, disturbed by the tension in both adults now standing too still. Alex's gaze shifted to him briefly. The baby's cheeks were flushed from on and off crying, one sock again slipping low around his ankle. His tiny hand knotted in the fabric of Tuna's blouse with an urgency far bigger than his size. "He's been like this since you left?" Alex asked quietly. Tuna nodded. "I tried to put him down. He wouldn't stay." Alex looked away for a second, jaw tightening, then turned toward the gate. "We open it together." The words landed between them with more weight than they should have. Not because of the parcel alone, because of everything else they now implied. Fear had not allowed them the luxury of distance this morning. Whatever she had asked him to do earlier, this moment had already pulled them back to the same side of the danger. Tuna swallowed. "I'm coming with you." Alex's answer came at once. "No." She met his eyes. It was the first sharp thing between them since his return. Not anger, just two people frightened in different ways. "I'm not staying back here while you..." "You're staying with Henry inside the doorway," Alex said, keeping his voice low so it would not strike like command. "Close enough to see me. Far enough that if there's anything wrong, you can shut the door." Tuna held his gaze for another second. Then Henry made a soft, distressed cry again and buried his face under her chin, and the argument left her. She nodded once. Alex stepped back outside. He moved toward the gate slowly, watching the ground, the fence, the parcel, the road beyond. Morning sun fell across the metal latch and made the twine almost absurdly plain. There was no visible trap, no sudden movement, only that small package hanging there like a patient cruelty. From the doorway, Tuna stood clutching Henry so tightly she had to force herself to loosen her grip every few breaths. The baby sensed the fear in her and would not lift his head from her shoulder. His legs tucked close against her body. His little fingers still worked restlessly at her blouse. Seeking, calming, seeking again. Alex removed the parcel from the gate and brought it back to the porch. He set it on the small wooden table by the wall, then looked up at Tuna once before opening it. Inside the paper wrapping was a flat white envelope. Nothing else. No sound. No device. No box this time. Just paper. Alex slid a finger beneath the flap and opened it carefully. A photograph fell into his hand. He saw it first. Then his face changed. Tuna knew in that instant that this was worse than the ring. "Alex," she whispered, "what is it?" He did not answer immediately. He turned the photograph slowly so she could see. It was a picture of Tuna in the yard 3 days earlier, seated on the low step outside the house with Henry in her lap, feeding him from a small bowl while he leaned clumsily into her hand. The angle was distant, taken from beyond the fence line or from somewhere near the trees. But it was close enough to show details no stranger should have been allowed to keep. The spoon. The cloth over her shoulder. Henry's little bib with the faded blue stitching she used only at home. Tuna stopped breathing. For 1 second the porch, the sun, the gate, the entire morning seemed to tilt away beneath her. "He took this here," she said. Alex nodded once. Henry stirred at the sound of her voice changing and gave a frightened whimper. She clutched him closer instinctively, eyes still fixed on the photograph. She remembered that morning. The weather had been mild. Henry had been sleepy and difficult about breakfast, leaning into her, batting weakly at the spoon, almost spilling porridge down his own shirt. It had been one of those small domestic moments so ordinary she had not known it could become evidence. Alex pulled something else from the envelope. A note. He unfolded it. You hold him every hour. Who will hold him when you can't? The air left Tuna's lungs in a harsh, tiny sound she could not hide. Henry, startled by that sound, began crying in earnest now. Not loudly at first, but with the rising panic of a baby who feels his mother break composure before he understands why. Tuna turned away from the porch on instinct alone, pacing once then twice, whispering to him, pressing kisses against his hair while her whole body trembled. Alex folded the note sharply and shoved it back into the envelope as if putting it out of sight could make it less vicious. But the damage was already done, because whoever had written that line knew exactly where to wound her. Alex closed the door behind them the moment they were back inside. Tuna had gone straight to the bedroom without meaning to, as if some primitive part of her believed walls within walls might protect Henry better. She sat on the edge of the bed and rocked him until his crying softened to weak little sobs. He clung to her with his whole tiny body, face wet, breath hitching, unable to settle because she herself had not settled. Alex stood in the doorway for a moment, then came in only as far as he needed to. He was watching for days, Tuna whispered. The sentence was not really for him. It was for the room, for the reality now filling it. Alex's hand tightened around the envelope. Maybe longer. That made her close her eyes. Henry's crying had faded into those exhausted after sobs that break the heart more than the original tears. Tuna rubbed his back carefully, slowly, the way she always did, counting the rhythm without realizing it. 1, 2, 3. Pause. Again. Her whole life with Henry seemed to live inside motions like that. Feeding him, bathing him, picking up the dropped sock, testing the porridge on the spoon, rocking him after bad dreams, and now some unseen stranger had reached into that private world and proved it was visible. Tuna lowered her face to Henry's head. I shouldn't have called you back. Alex looked at her sharply. Don't say that. She laughed once, but it broke in the middle and became almost a sob. I sent you away because I was afraid for him. Then I called you back because I was afraid for him. I don't even know what the right thing is anymore. The honesty of that hurt him because it was exactly the truth. He crossed the room then, slower than urgency wanted him to, careful not to feel like another force pressing in on her. When he stopped near the bed, he lowered his voice. The right thing is that you are not alone with this. Tuna looked up. Her eyes were bright now, not with softness, but with exhaustion, fear, and the grief of being forced to let someone back into the danger she had tried to keep him from. He knows Henry's routine, she whispered. He knows where I feed him, what bib he wears. He knows I hold him all the time. Alex said nothing for a second because rage had risen too high in him to trust speech immediately. Then, more steadily, yes. That single word changed the room. No comfort wrapped around it. No false hope. Just truth, and the fact that he would not make her carry it alone. Henry stirred again and whimpered, one tiny hand searching weakly between his own chest and Tuna's shoulder. Without thinking, Alex reached out and lifted the fallen corner of the blanket against the baby's leg where it had slipped. Henry did not resist the touch, but neither did he fully notice it. He was too young, too tired, too wrung out by fear. Tuna watched that small gesture and had to look away. Because this was exactly the life she had wanted to shield from Alex in order to keep it safe. And yet in moments like this, the shape of what he already was to them became almost impossible to deny. Alex unfolded the photograph again and studied it more carefully. The angle came from low behind the fence line, slightly left of the guava tree near the side path. Whoever took it had not been close enough to enter the yard, but close enough to watch without being seen. He looked at the back. Another detail was written there in black pen. 9:10 a.m., Tuesday. Tuna saw it too. He knows the time, she said. Alex's eyes lifted to her. And that means he wasn't just passing by. The sentence settled heavily between them. Tuna's grip on Henry tightened again, and this time the baby protested with a tired, unhappy cry. She loosened her arms at once, whispering apology after apology against his head. I'm sorry, baby. I'm sorry. Alex turned away then and went to the window, not to leave her, but because anger needed a direction. The road outside looked calm. A farm road. A morning road. A place where children should be able to nap in open doorways, and mothers should be able to feed them breakfast in sunlight without becoming part of someone else's private game. When he spoke, his voice was lower than before. "This is no longer only about warning us." Tuna's heart lurched. "What do you mean?" He turned back. The ring was a threat. The calls were a threat. This. He lifted the photograph. "This is obsession." She went still. The word fit too well. Henry had settled enough to hiccup softly between breaths now, his tears drying against her shoulder. One of his little hands still lay fisted near her collarbone, as if sleep and fear had taught him not to let go fully. Tuna looked at him and felt a terror deeper than the night before, because the note had aimed not at death, but at helplessness. "What do we do?" she asked. Alex was already moving toward answer before the sentence ended. "You and Henry leave this house for now." The words shocked her. "With you?" "Yes." "Yes." She stared at him. There was no hesitation in his face now. The decision had been made somewhere in him the moment he saw the photograph, not as romance, not as opportunity, as protection sharpened by necessity. "I told you not to come back," Tuna said faintly, as though the memory already belonged to another version of the morning. "And you called me back." His voice softened only slightly. "So listen to me now." The directness of it might once have frightened her. Instead, it steadied her because, for the first time since the parcel appeared, someone was speaking from the other side of panic. "You are not staying here today," Alex said. "Not after this." Tuna lowered her eyes to Henry, to the damp lashes resting on his cheeks, to the soft weight of him yielding finally toward sleep again in her arms. Leave the house. The thought hurt. This small place had been built from effort, from routine, from the ordinary tenderness of raising a child in peace. And yet, how could she stay, now that someone had shown her this photograph? "I don't want to bring danger somewhere else," she whispered. Alex understood at once that she was not speaking only of the road or a building. She meant him too. His home, his world, his name. He took one more careful step toward her. "The danger is already moving," he said. "The only question now is whether I let you face it from a house they have already studied." Tuna's eyes filled again. Not with indecision. With the pain of knowing he was right. Henry gave one last soft, sleepy cry and then melted more fully against her, his body heavy at last. That tiny surrender decided it for her more than any argument could. She nodded. Alex exhaled once, quietly, as if holding himself together required constant control now that action had replaced waiting. "I'll pack what he needs first," he said. Tuna blinked. "You know what he needs?" The question was almost absurd under the circumstances, but grief and tenderness often open such strange doors. Alex answered simply, "Enough." He crossed to the small shelf by the wall and began gathering with careful precision the milk bottle, the spare cloth, the little tin of powder, the extra shirt, the blue blanket Henry slept best with. Just seeing the life inside this room the way he always had, only now without pretending that seeing meant nothing. Tuna watched him and felt something ache so deeply it almost became gratitude, too painful to hold. Then his phone vibrated. He glanced down. Unknown number. The room went cold all over again. Alex answered at once, eyes never leaving the door. "Speak." The voice on the other end was the same calm male voice as before. "You're moving them too soon." Alex's hand tightened around the phone. From the bed, Tuna looked up in horror. The man continued almost conversationally. "Check the photograph again, Mr. Alex. You missed what matters." The line went dead. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then Alex snatched up the photograph, turned it over, and looked harder. In the far left edge of the frame, barely visible beyond the post near the house, was something so small it should have escaped notice. A second shadow. Not Tuna's, not Henry's. Someone much closer to the house than the photographer should have been. Tuna called Alex back because fear for Henry became stronger than the distance she had tried to force between them. But the new parcel proved something far worse than a simple threat. Someone has been watching the intimate rhythm of mother and child closely enough to turn ordinary tenderness into terror. Now Alex has made the decision to take Tuna and Henry away from the farmhouse. Yet the final call suggests the danger has already come nearer than either of them realized. And with a second shadow hidden in the photograph itself, the question is no longer who is watching from outside the gate, but who has already stood dangerously close to the life inside it.